Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Conrad. I hope everyone's had a good lunch break and are ready to dive back into the findings of the 2024 Global Soft Power Index. As you've seen in our previous presentations, this year's analysis of the Global Soft Power Index looked at soft power's influence in the key segments of the economy. And what do the results tell us? Soft power shows a very clear and strong association with the performance of the key segments of the economy. The association can vary from 34% within investment to roughly 60% in the trade and talent segments. Now, our next panel, of course, focuses on the future of talent. So just looking at the talent segment of the economy, we are seeing a correlation of 60% between the inflow of international students and the Global Soft Power Index. As you can see from this graph, Soft Power Index plotted on the horizontal axis and the inflow of international students plotted on the vertical axis, you can see the strong association between soft power and the inflow of international students. Given this strong association, it becomes imperative for nation brand managers to understand what soft power perception drives the inflow of international students into a country. And the Global Soft Power Index of 2024 enables us to understand this, as this year within the index, we have measured the recommendation of nation brands as destinations to invest, travel, work, and of course, study in. And if we look at recommendation to study in and what drives the recommendation to study in, what we are finding is quite interesting results. As one would expect, you're seeing a perception towards strong educational systems emerging as one of the key drivers of recommendation. However, it is not the most important, and there are also several other factors that are at play that drive the recommendation to study in a given country. Economic stability, ranked first, is viewed as a key driver of recommendation to study in a country. And this is, of course, a crucial factor for multiple reasons. It ensures cost of living remains stable, it ensures lower risk of currency fluctuation, and also indicates a robust job market. And the same can be said for political stability as well, which is another key driver of recommendation to study within the Global Soft Power Index. Now, products and brands the world loves, and being influential in arts and entertainments is also emerging as key recommendations to study in a given destination. And these are indicators of good quality of life and the cultural exposure within a country, and which can play a key role in shaping the students' overall experience in a country. And interestingly, we are also seeing two sustainable future metrics within the recommendation drivers as well: sustainable cities and transport, and also investing in green energy and technology. And what all of this tells us is that it is not enough to be viewed as a nation that has strong educational system, but there are also several attributes that need to be looked at and need to be influenced to move the dial and to improve the inflow of international students into a country. And this is, of course, what our next panel will be talking about as well, on how to leverage the soft power to attract the world's top talents. Before we move into the next panel discussion, I'd like to play a quick video to introduce the regional leaders and the overall global leader on recommendation to study from the 2024 Global Soft Power Index.
congratulations to the United Kingdom. Now on to our panel discussion. And I invite Clare and her panelists to join us here on stage. Thank you.
I knew that we should have asked for walk-up music, because that's quite a long way across that stage. Thank you very much, Danushka, for introducing us to this topic. Some of you may be wondering why I'm sat here. My name is Clare Dewhirst. I am the director of City Nation Place, and we bring the people and the stories behind places together through our website and through conferences and events. And so it's a joy to be here with this wonderful panel. I think it's very interesting that this year's Soft Power Summit has such a strong emphasis on connecting soft power to some of the real challenges that those who are involved in place branding and place marketing face. Growing trade, attracting investment, attracting talent, attracting visitors. And at City Nation Place, we've seen such a growing emphasis on the need to attract talent. It's called the talent wars in the USA. Cities, regions and countries recognizing that to compete in the global economy and to respond to the global challenges such as the climate crisis, they need the knowledge and the skills that particularly scientists and tech experts can bring to them. So the job of this panel is to try and explore how the soft power of a nation brand can be leveraged to attract that talent. And we're very lucky to have our three panelists with us today. We have Alexandre Edelmann, who is the head of Presence Switzerland, which is the organization responsible for promoting Switzerland's image abroad and for implementing Switzerland's strategy for communication abroad. We have Johanna Jäkälä, who is the executive director for Finland Promotion Services at Business Finland, which is the government's organization for innovation funding and trade, travel and investment promotion. And we have David Downs, who is the Chief Executive of New Zealand Story. I don't know why I wrote this down, but a published author on New Zealand innovation and previously senior roles at Microsoft. So that's why I thought that was interesting, because it's all to do with tech, isn't it? This was a very talkative panel in our briefing call, but I am going to try and give you time for questions as well. So do save them up. So first of all, let me come to you, Johanna, not just ladies first, but also I'm going alphabetically by country. In Brand Finance's words in their exec summary, I think they've said that Finland is punching above your weight in some of these recommendation rankings. So where do you think this strength comes from? And reflecting on what you've heard today or seen in the report and on your experience at Business Finland, what do you see as your challenges?
Thank you, first of all, of inviting us and Finland to the panel today, together with lovely gentlemen here from cooperating countries. I don't know where the slide is. Actually, we had a slide here because I want to start with something that I think is actually something that we are very, very proud of.
Let me run and get the clicker. It's not a big stage.
Go,
I can get it across there.
There it is.
Thank you. There you
Having
go.
Clare back on her seat here. Finland has ranked, I think, 6 times in a row, as according to UN's ranking, as the happiest country in the world. And of course, today when we're going to talk about talent attraction especially, I think happiness is a thing that we all aim for. And looking at the brand index, of course, behind this ranking, of course, also the UN ranking, is things like a stable economy, democracy, a well-governed country. And when you are looking for a place to relocate your life, you don't, of course, only, we all know that, we don't look only at the work possibilities, working possibilities, the career possibilities. We look at life as a total. And when we talk about the happiest country in the world, of course, that is life as a total. And your career and your work includes also your family. Finland is known for a well-perceived education system. We are quite famous for that system, which has been born throughout the years. And I would say that Finland invests a lot in education, educating its youth and our children, but also, of course, adults. and I'm sure we will come back to that later in the panel. So stable economy is, of course, something. And when it comes to happiness, of course, we see that talent attraction is not a standalone thing. Talent attraction is very much connected to all the other aspects that we're going to discuss or have been discussed here today, and of course throughout the seminar. Trade, visit or tourism promotion, investments, they are all linked to talent. Investments pretty much state that if there's no talent available, it's often a showstopper for foreign investments into the country. So pretty much strengthening also in the future the things that we are already strong at. And when you ask that, we are a little bit out of our league, so to say, when it comes to our GDP compared to many other countries in the set. But I would say that as a Finn, of course, we tend to be quite down to earth with things. We still have a lot of work to do because looking at our comparison countries, even our lovely neighbors, Sweden and Norway, they are still ahead of us in the total rankings. But surely we've done something well in Finland and are known maybe for transparency, good governance and innovation, of course, and technology especially, and connected education with that, which I'm sure we will talk about soon.
Yes, absolutely. So, David, come to you next. Where do you see your opportunities and challenges in New Zealand when it comes to talent attraction?
Well, kia ora koutou katoa, ena mana ena reo ringatira mā tēnā koutou. In our native language of New Zealand, that I just said, I recognise your presence, your prestige, the languages and the voices that have come together and the many leaders gathered here today. And I'm refusing to talk any further until I've got a picture of New Zealand behind me, so there you go. Thank you very much. I guess the great thing about, there was a great New Zealand leader many years ago, and he said that one of the things we should aspire to do as a country is be the place where talent wants to live. And that phrase really stuck with so many people, because what we realise, of course, is that we have a very special part of the world, very similar in many ways to both Switzerland and Finland in terms of mountainous beauty, lakes, a gorgeous country. But we're also far away from the rest of the world, and that's undeniable. It took me 34 hours to get here, so if I start to nod off, your job is to give me like that. But so the challenge, therefore, is not have you got the makings of a beautiful place to live. The challenge is how do you make sure that talent wants to move and relocate and has the ability, I suppose, to feel successful as well. So it's not just about come to our country and ski on our beautiful mountains or go swimming in our lakes or whatever it might be, drink our wine. It's also have a fulfilling life, bring up a family, do career things that are meaningful to you and give you a sense of satisfaction. And so that's the sort of challenge that we find. In the Global Soft Power Index, we rank, again, the classic cliche of punching above our weight. We rank fairly highly on many of these attributes. The thing that we often need to do is make sure that people realise there is more to New Zealand than the natural beauty of the country. There is also fulfilling, meaningful work. There's innovation, there's science, there's technology, etc. So that's where, in my role, New Zealand Story, our job is to help the rest of the world see some of those attributes and really leverage the things that things like soft power tell us are attractive to others as well. So I could speak more, but I'll let Alexandre talk.
Pass on to Alexandre. Yes. Yeah, I mean, Switzerland does quite well in this area in the report, but from what you've heard today, what do you see as your strengths? What do you see as your challenges?
First of all, I would say it's a very good report.
It's because he's like top of 3 of the
yeah,
things.
exactly.
2 of them, but it's unfair. We should be a top of 3. I agree with you. But no, it's interesting. Yeah. Surveys are engaging for the people who believe in them. We're facing a change. It's always interesting because it's self-reflecting for the country. It's a discussion that happened this morning, also with former Prime Minister, about we're not doing so well economically, but why people think we're the biggest power in that sense. And it's always healthy for all of us, I think, to have an outside sight on the country. What you see here is, when I show that in Switzerland, most Swiss people say, stop with mountain, chocolate, and beautiful landscape. We are the most innovative country in the world, product placement. but it's a fact. We are in top in rankings. We have very good universities, leading universities in continental Europe and so on. And why the hell do you still have to come with that? And then I have to explain that I'm not coming with that. These are the results of survey we're doing in 20 countries. This is the part where, when we say Switzerland, what is the first thing that comes into your mind? And basically, globally, this is what comes out. Nobody ever spontaneously connects Switzerland with innovation. For most of the university presidents, when I'm telling that to them, I say, it's a pity you're not doing your job. Thanks God, they're not my bosses. And on top of that, I say, indeed, it doesn't reflect it all, but it's a great asset when you're talking about talent, as we say it. If you see everything listed here, it's mainly positive. I mean, there are other countries that most probably, if you ask the same question about what are your spontaneous association with the country, would be happy to have that. Basically, it's positive, and you can build on that. When you go to Zurich, the biggest city in Switzerland, where you have ETH, Zurich, which is in the top 3 university worldwide for IT and so on, where you have Google, R&D, where you have Disney Lab and so on. It's pretty fun to explain that to Londoners, and I love London. Anytime I'm here, I'm very happy and inspired. But when I travel in the morning with a tube to come here, I do remember in Zurich, within 5 minutes, you go out of your lab at one of the most prestigious universities worldwide, and you can swim in the Limmat, which is the Thames of Switzerland, and we can swim in the rivers in Switzerland. Not bragging, but when I explain that...
Every British person in the room just went...
Swimming, yes, you can swim, first of all, in the river on top of it. But, and the same for me in the morning, I commute to Bern. I'm living in Lausanne, commuting to Bern. It's 1.5 hours, door to door. But I sit on a train where I have power. I can work on a train, and I see the wonderful Lavo UNESCO World Heritage landscape when I travel. And I don't want to Heidize it too much, but nonetheless, if you compare that with friends of mine commuting in London in a tube where you have stand-up in the morning, so you know the drill, what are the chances to be more inspired when you arrive to your lab in Zurich after the lunch break when you've been swimming in a lovely river and going back to the lab, or if you already spent 2 hours commuting? And again, it's not a disrespect to London, but I say this is one of the key assets to come back to your question. I think that having that quality of life, indeed, when we're talking about talent, yesterday was fun. So it was indeed not fun, because we had a discussion yesterday evening. We are very, very low in the rankings of fun about Switzerland, which is perfectly unfair. Nonetheless, this is only perception. But indeed, when you're a talent, you're looking at salary. Salaries are good in Switzerland. Net salary, you're looking at quality of life. And quality of life, not only what I mentioned, but also it's a safe space where health system is accessible and affordable. It's expensive, but it's expensive for everyone. So at least it's something good. You can walk on the streets. I mean, it's safe. You feel safe. Security is good. Salaries are good. It's not everything perfect. I mean, when you see what you have to spend a month in Zurich or Geneva to rent a flat, I wouldn't pretend this is the easiest place ever. But nonetheless, basically, if you take the total of it, it's a decent one where it's small enough that you get quickly out. I mean, this perfect opposite of New Zealand, our friends. If you want to go out of Switzerland to travel to London, it takes you 1.5 hours and you land in City Airport. Or you take the train, it's 6 hours. If you live in Germany, it's the same. So it's very well connected, Central of Europe. Infrastructure is good. So in that sense, even if you don't want to spend all of your time in Switzerland, you can leave, which is not the case in all the countries.
I don't know if I'd make that your country slogan. If you don't like it, you can leave quickly.
What about if you don't like it, you can't leave?
You know, it's Sweden. You don't know in New Zealand. You don't like it.
You can't.
Sorry for you.
Yeah, you can fly for an hour and a half and you'll still be in New Zealand.
You see, in Switzerland, you go anywhere in 2 hours, you're abroad. So it's very well connected. It's a pragmatic country. And I think on top of it, we have the, so of course, it's nature and so on. It's also a culture where we have 4 official languages, which is 2 more than New Zealand. I hope you feel that we spend far too much time together the last 4 hours. I know everything about New Zealand, including the right of vote for women in 1894, first country in the world.
That's debatable still, because Finland was also in that ranking, but we'll get coming back to this.
They'll be much better than there. But I think that, so you have the framework of that, and you have something where we have a culture, so 4 official languages, we aggregators. In Switzerland, 25% of the inhabitants are not Swiss. If you take the new generation, so 50% of the kids born in Switzerland, if you go back 1 or 2 generations ahead, they were not Swiss. So it's a very strong aggregator of having different culture and to agree to disagree. And again, if you're talking about talent, it's not the winner takes it all. It's we are used to have open discussion, collaboration within the people. So it's a pragmatical, solution-oriented, human-centric as well. We're all talking about purpose, but indeed, in more advanced economies as we are, there is something about purpose. Of course, it's well-being, it's also GDP, it's a mix of many things. But indeed, in the field of research, the president of the ETH, that university, says innovation without purpose brings nothing. In that sense, the mix
I'd like to come back to the purpose question, and it may be what comes out of this next question, actually. I mean, first of all, you have chocolate, and apparently students like the product, so that's good for students. But I'm not at all surprised that you've all started talking about quality of life, which is, I think, every place I hear talks about quality of life when they're talking about talent. They've all moved on from talking about wages, and they talk about quality of life. So how do you get that differentiation? And I want to come back to what Sir John Major said earlier when he was surprised, as you've referenced, that the perceptions of the UK are so strong, or the perceptions of UK economy and stability are so strong, because there is this lag between perceptions of soft power and the reality. It's a big picture issue, soft power, and we know that nation brands just kind of go like this. They don't go boom, boom, boom. But talent attraction is a nitty-gritty challenge, and you know how many jobs you have available. You know that to attract a particular employer, you need to have X number of, technicians in a particular sector. So how do you connect structurally? I'd like to talk about the structure of your roles and where it sits. How do you connect this big picture stuff with that nitty-gritty, bringing, not people saying, oh yeah, I'd like to live in Switzerland, I'd like to work in Switzerland, but actually packing their bags, selling their house, changing their children's school, and coming to live in your place? I'll come back, let's do it in order again. I'll come to you, Johanna, first on that.
I think that's a very crucial question because, of course, I mean, it's a different thing to dream about moving somewhere.
Exactly.
And as you said, the reality of actually packing your family and moving across the world somewhere. So I think the first thing is, of course, that you have, on top of what we already discussed, you have an educational system, you have housing which is affordable, because of course, I mean, it's a package financially also to move. But on top of that, I think what is really important is to be able to visualize the life and the community that you are stepping into. Because we all know that it's not the easiest thing. Those of you who have lived abroad or moved abroad, it's not the easiest thing to integrate into that society and the communities. So I think that the cooperation, first of all, between businesses and us who promote, so that we really have those communities and ecosystems of businesses where you have like-minded people in the ecosystem. At least in Finland, of course, we're known for technology, innovation, engineering, and it tends to be, of course, so that people with certain knowledges and talent in certain areas, like engineering or digitalization, or hydrogen clusters, as for example, we promote in Finland currently, they tend to also want to have like-minded people around them so that they can, anybody wants to, of course, advance in the skills and grow in the skills. So that at least we've noticed that plays a crucial role, that you have a community of like-minded people who you can start to become friends with even. And then, of course, the second part is the whole process. At least in Finland, we put a lot of effort in cooperation with cities, with the immigration office, because the bureaucracy also plays a big role. How easy is it, depending, of course, which country you are departing on, in integrating, first of all, getting all your licenses and the paperwork, so to call, in place. So we have created a system where we actually work really closely with the cities, with the businesses, and us as a governmental promoter so that we really know enough together of that process, because we can't fix all of the process, then the cities or the businesses needs to fix their part. So we tend to do that design together. And it's not perfect, but we are getting there. So I really appreciate the good cooperation within Finland, within the different instances.
Thank you. And how does it work structurally in New Zealand? Because New Zealand Story sits above all of the departments that...
Well, I draw it above. I'm not sure they always see it that way. But I guess a few points there. First of all, New Zealand is a country that you have to want to go to because, you know, we are the last country on the world that was settled by humans. Only about 1,000 years ago, the humans first set foot, the Māori people. And so everyone that has come to New Zealand has come seeking something. With the adventure, you know, the first Europeans that came were seeking a different life than they had here in England. The Irish, the Scottish. So that it's a nation of settlers, and it's a nation of people who are typically the second children or the last children in the family because they didn't inherit the land back home, so they had to move. So you've got this kind of sense of adventurousness that's almost built in, it's almost genetically there. In our language, we call it pōtiki. Pōtiki literally means the youngest child, and we talk about the spirit of the youngest child, this restless energy, this innovation, but innovation with kind of looking at what others have done and wanting to be different. And so the reason I talk about that is because I think having an alignment of values is a big part of it. You know, so New Zealand has no problem attracting people to come to our country. Like they're beating down the doors a lot of the time. During COVID, the US waiting list for New Zealand visa processing was just off the charts crazy. Did I say during COVID? I mean during the Trump era. Anyway, so we had no problem with it attracting humans. What we want to do is make sure that when they come, they feel like they are part of the country, they're aligned with our values. We're a very diverse country. There's 200 languages spoken in the city that I live in. Something like 25% of the people who currently live in New Zealand were born outside of New Zealand. So diversity is a huge strength for the country, but the thing you want to make sure is they feel welcomed and valued and their values are welcomed as well. So in terms of structurally how we do it, to go to your question, we at New Zealand Story, our role is to work with all the other parts of the system that thinks about this, so the immigration department or the universities, the skills engines, etc. If we get a moment later on, I'll show you kind of a worked example of a project that we did, particularly in the technology sector. But what we're trying to also think about is what are the skills that the country needs for the next phase of our growth. And for us, it's things like construction and engineering skills, and we need advanced technology skills, etc. And sometimes we need ski instructors, and we need people that work in a cafe. You know, it does change. And so the priorities of what skills you're trying to attack also can change. But as I say, if you come back to the fundamental, what you really want is to make sure that people want to live in a country where they feel welcomed, they feel like their values are aligned, and where they can do meaningful and fulfilling work.
Okay, great. So we've got ecosystem, we've got values, and I'm going to come back to you to expand on purpose a little bit, Alexandre.
Good thing. I'm not sure people are coming to Switzerland for purpose.
Oh, I thought you said
Voilà.
that's for the purpose
Chocolate,
of innovation.
I think they're staying in Switzerland for that.
Okay.
No.
See what you did there.
Yes, we'll be working on that. No, I think Switzerland is a very liberal country, which is part of the success of the country. It means the state is not as big as in other countries, and the philosophy of state mainly is defining frameworks for private sector to develop itself. So it's not a coordinated program. We don't have, so we meet, of course, with private sector. There are many exchanges in order to have a framework that is adapted to it. But then I think primarily talents are coming if they're hired by companies. Of course, there are some, when I was 20 years old, all my colleagues at high school wanted to go to Australia, whatever to do. It was a dream. In Switzerland, it was a moment, it was a trend. And then they went to Australia, been working in different companies, some came back and some stayed. But mainly, I mean, the talents we're talking about, they first want to work for IBM, or they want to work for Nokia, if we're in older, and so on.
Welcome to Finland.
See? Now, with that kind of thing, and then they agree to work for a company that is located in a country that makes sense for them. So it's a combo of many things. You have universities, cooperation between research. If you take innovation as the last leg of education, research, and innovation, innovation is typically private-based and go to market and then research. So you have to need a link. So they choose an ecosystem first. Mm-hmm. And the fact is that within this ecosystem, the University of the Research Center of Switzerland, they do have that very high level. It's like a virtuous circle. You have to be good. If you have purpose without talent, or if you have many values but are not very good at researching, it's useless. If you research for nothing, then you might have a lack of sense in your life. So that's the balance between all of that, and that's multi-layered decision. Again, if you're 25 years old, if you're the right talent, everybody wants you. I mean, we're all competing for the same talents. IT, I mean, all of us in the venue, we're all looking for IT talent. Cooking talents a little bit less, which is unfair because it's also very important for happiness. But nonetheless, IT is key. Anything related to AI, quantum computing, which is the next big thing where we are really strong in that field since 30 years in Switzerland. But now everybody's, I mean, if you take ETH, that university, there are many other ones, but take that one as an example. I mean, most of the students are hired before they get the degree. Mm-hmm. You've got Google in Zurich, it's awesome, but none of the Swiss SME have a chance to get these talents. It's also in the talent competition within the country. It's also a challenge. How do we keep the SME ecosystem alive when you have tech leaders being that strong? Nothing against one or the other, but it's also in the balance. It might create sometimes tension within the country if you say, okay, all the good talents. So we pay with public money universities, top research centers, and then you have massive, so GAFAM coming and hiring all the talents. It's great for GDP, it's great for opportunities, but at the same time, if you destroy at the same time the SME ecosystem, it doesn't work. So that balance, and when we talk about values, also what does the country want? I mean, attracting talent is one thing, but happiness of the country, in the consistency of discussion, it's also important. So finding that balance in the framework and granting and finding ways to have a well-distributed talent allocation is also something important.
It's very hard for me to sit here and not do a bit of a pitch for City Nation Place because mainly lots of other places are coming to mind as you talk about this, but they're not so much soft power related, but you talked about integrating people into the community. Vilnius in Lithuania does a very good job of that. They have a house of Vilnius where they particularly took a lot of people from Ukraine and are working to integrate that culturally. Glasgow have mapped their tech ecosystem and as a result are attracting increasing amounts of tech startup businesses because they can see there's an ecosystem that will welcome them. It's just suddenly caught Asbjorn's eyes. Greater Copenhagen, Copenhagen Capacity did a wonderful campaign to attract tech talent, which was all about come here because we're like an efficient engine, and that kind of appeals to the psychology of the tech talent that they were trying to attract. You can search for all of these on our website. But to come back to soft power, and I think we should, let's talk about some of those big global challenges and how that's going to relate to the soft power of your respective countries and how you think that might have a knock-on effect for talent. You mentioned Trump being in power. I hope you're going to employ a lot more immigration staff because this audience think Trump's going to be back in power.
Sounds like it.
But let's talk about, first of all, geopolitics and how countries are responding to Russia's aggression in Ukraine, or the war in Ukraine, and also what's going on in the Middle East. Do you see that as having an impact on talent attraction? I'm going to come to you first, Alexandre, because you raised this in our briefing call.
I have the diplomatic way of answering.
You did. Can you remember it?
I did. I think there's a massive challenge. Listening to former Prime Minister this morning, he was addressing how barely bearable that was to see all these people dying in Ukraine. I think talking about talents and being based in Europe, when we talk about the global south, whatever it means, the double standards or the risk to be misunderstood as governments when we talk about values and purpose is a key challenge when we discuss if people are still willing to come to Europe or not. I'm not commenting politically what's happening. I do feel, we talked also with our own talents back at home, the question of how do you trust your government? How we're talking, values matter. So what's happening now, it's a big challenge. Middle East, of course, Ukraine as well. So how, plus being on stage, talking about how good we are and how number 1, 2, 3, whatever we are, it's something, it's part of the job, but in a world that is very unstable. So how do we balance between the reality of this complex world and, if we're on stage, it's because our countries are doing well. Finland is probably much more under pressure than we are because much closer to some country that might have an impact about Europe. All of us, but maybe you're geographically closer to that. But it's a balance to find. We're talking about soft power in a moment where hard power is there, and this was part of the speech of the Prime Minister saying how, I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about soft power. I mean, soft power is key if related to values and to the common interests we have. But defining what is common in a world where we are struggling, finding common grounds, let it be at the UN Security Council, on different topics, climate change. I mean, on many topics, common grounds was certainly easier to find 20 years ago. We're at that moment where the balance is not easy. So how do we use soft power? Not only to attract investment and talent, I think it's part of the job, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but also behind that the values we have, why talent should come, why should we work together. I think this is something that has to be redefined. I don't have the answer, happy to discuss that with all of you, but I think it's part of, it's a political discussion of what do we want, which is bigger than all of agencies, I would say.
And as we say, Finland is geographically closer to this. So.
Yes, we have a border with Russia, I think 1,400 kilometers long. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, when it comes to Finland's awareness during the NATO joining process, of course, we can see in research that thus, I mean, the background is really sad, and the political situation in the world is absolutely devastating. But from an awareness point of view, and going back to the stability of the country, the kind of that part which actually, when we talk about talent, is one of the top drivers, we can see in the research as joining NATO actually brought a lot of awareness to our country, but also, of course, that stability, which is a good thing. Then the other thing is, of course, when we look at the political tensions in the world, we've already seen for years kind of a far-right discussion, not only in Nordic countries, but I think all over. And when we look at that development, I think it's really, really important for us as soft power people to communicate the facts around talent attraction. Because of course, if there is an economic downturn, what happens in each country, every country I would say, is that there's a fear for losing jobs, and then of course that kind of polarization in the dialogue becomes very visible. So I think it's our job to communicate also the facts behind talent attraction, because we all know that, for example, in a country like Finland, where we are quite a small population of 5.5 million people, and combined with age groups that are actually retiring, we have a population which is aging. And we all know that in European countries at least, the birth rates are not like going upwards, the other way around. So in order for this society, for Finland to be able to grow economically and be a welfare country also in the future, we need the talent, because Finnish people are not going to be enough. Mm-hmm. So there are facts and a story behind that. And I think it's really important that we talk about those facts, because it's very natural that when the economic downturn is there, that those discussions and dialogues are raised by the media, of course, but also raised in a political sense. Then I would say that one thing when it comes to values, for example, for Finland, is really important, that in our strategy, the Finnish strategy, of course, we are going for net zero. Sustainability is in the core of our actions, and action over words is actually something that we as Finns are kind of a little bit famous for. Less words, more actions. And sustainability is very much in that agenda for us. And digitalization, innovation, engineering is very much those needs in talent also, in order to be here and solve together with other countries the sustainability, the climate questions of the world. And why I'm raising this is that, yes, we are now seeing geopolitical tensions and devastating wars, but if we don't solve the sustainability and climate issues, Going back to Sir John Major here earlier, I think he very wisely said that we need to look further. We need to look like 35 years, 30 years, 50 years. Imagine a world where we don't solve these topics. And that's Finland's strategy, to be part of those who are solving those topics. And I think our engineering and our innovations has a lot to give. May it be green energy, may it be green solutions or that transition.
I'm really pleased to hear you talk about the internal audience, because everything else about this conference has been about external audiences and international perceptions. But when it comes to talent, there needs to be, in my view, a focus on workforce development as much as on talent. It's crazy if everyone's trying to steal everybody else's talent without looking to all their own people. Yeah. The sustainability issue, in New Zealand, you've talked about this before, the perception of New Zealand is a very sustainable country. That is your tourism proposition. So how are you connecting that to talent?
Yeah, it's the existential issue of our time, isn't it? The climate crisis is something that's, in the times of hard power like this, it's easy to forget, but actually the reality is, we're an island nation. We sit in the South Pacific, far away from the conflicts, although very aware of them and trying to play our role. But the role that we have in the Pacific is looking after our neighbours and friends who are really in crisis, some of them, in terms of the threats that they face with the change to the climate. And things, New Zealand, for example, while we look like a small country, we're actually the fourth largest sea territory of any country in the world. So we look after a vast proportion of the Pacific. And with that comes, things like innovation around the blue economy and understanding how the ocean works, etc. So there's quite a lot of that work going on in climate tech, if you like, and reaching hands out to neighbours to give them some help. That one of the things that I really value about living in that part of the world is that you've got a lot of indigenous cultures there. In New Zealand, we have the Māori across in Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. We've got Pacific cultures. And there's so much wisdom in indigenous culture, and if you haven't sort of leaned into it, it's interesting to do that. The Prime Minister earlier was talking about having a 20 to 30 year plan, which sounds, really radical. The Māori people of New Zealand, traditionally, and even today in their business environments, will have 100-year-long business plans. I know one tribe who has a 500-year plan at the top of the South Island. When you think in that time frame, you're forced to think completely differently about what sort of world you want to live in, what do you want for your, not even the children or your grandchildren, but the generations to come. And it's not done in a gimmicky way, it's seriously thought through. What will the land look like in 500 years from now? What would our environment, what will the birds and the trees, how will the water be? These really fundamental parts of life. And what are we doing today as the guardians of the land? We call it in our language kaitiaki. Kaitiaki is the person who cares for the land. There's very much this idea is that you borrowing the land from your grandchildren and you need to look after it on their behalf. Those are the sorts of things that really fundamentally change the kind of paradigms, the Western paradigms of thinking about exploitation or extractive economies. And so again, this is what we're trying to project to the world is if you want to come to a country that's trying to think in a 100 or a 500 year time frame, come and work with us, and we can't solve the world's problems by ourselves. To your point, I think it's we need the talent to come and help marry new ways of thinking with some of the indigenous and traditional ways of thinking, and then we might have a bit of a chance of beating some of these things.
Yeah, thank you. I've got one more question for one, but before I get to it, are there any questions from the floor? I think we've probably got time for one or two. I can't really see
one at the back, right?
Is there one at the back?
Yeah.
Very back.
Lovely.
Hi, Henry Farr, Brand Finance. We've talked a lot about brain drain in terms of wanting to attract talent. But earlier, Katie from Great spoke about UK CEOs representing companies around the world. So I'd be interested to know if you think there are some benefits to brain drain about your students going abroad, studying abroad, or your innovators working for big companies in other countries, and how that might not appear as an input, but it would an influence on other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump on that one. I think the movement of talent across the border is not all about one country losing and another country winning. It's about creating something better in both. We've done some analysis in New Zealand about, for example, people who have been educated in New Zealand. They might have come for university or something like that, and then go back to their home countries and carry on their career. Incredibly valuable as sort of unofficial expats or unofficial ambassadors. A lovely story is I was travelling with our previous Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and we were at an event in Singapore, of all places, and we didn't know this, but the guy who looked after the gardens in Singapore stood up and did a speech, and he spoke beautifully in our language, Te Reo Māori, and he spoke about how our country had influenced him. And we didn't realise the impact. And it's so much more powerful to have that connection with someone who has spent some time in your country and then gone back. It's also a bit of an unofficial strategy for us to widen our gene pool. We send our best-looking people, let's talk about happiness index, we send our best-looking people to places like London. They work for a couple of years, pop pints, whatever, and then they find a good-looking person, marry them, and then bring them back to New Zealand. It's like a...
Is that a strategy document
that's
somewhere
an unofficial strategy. It's like the Vikings, but much nicer.
Absolutely.
Do you have a comment answer to that question?
First of all, I think that love is crucial in talent attraction, and send the students to the world and they come back.
We should measure that in the soft power index next time. Love.
That's true. I agree. I fully agree. I mean, it's a global world, and I mean, throughout years, now we are talking about talent attraction, but if we think back 500 years, people have traveled. And that's the way ideas and competencies move around, thoughts. So I assume it's needed, at least for a small country like us. We are absolutely dependent on exchange between countries. And I think it's good. Innovation happens usually when you put people together with good backgrounds from various cultures, but also knowledge from various universities, because we all know that if you have a system where everybody's gone to the same school and all the same professors have been teaching, in the end we can question that, is it that even the professors are of course brilliant in their job, but it wouldn't harm to a little bit hear stories and thinking around various ecosystems, because I think the ecosystems are the crucial thing here. We all heard about Palo Alto or the Google tech centers. We have other countries with specialties, and I would say that Finland has a specialty when it comes to technology, engineering, and forestry, for example. There are certain competencies, but we lack then other competencies. So I'm all for it.
Alexandre, exchange important for
Switzerland? We have. So one challenge is that for Switzerland is people have been fighting back to get the talents back, because sometimes we're struggling a bit where some Swiss citizens that were very successful thought you had to go to the valley, because this is what's happening. If you want to launch a unicorn, it has to be
Silicon
California.
Valley, yeah.
And then it was a competition to say, hey, how do we get the people back? Or how do we allow them to develop the business in Switzerland, or to bring talents back? And of course, they're much better if they've been studying abroad. And all of us, I mean, that's, I think, coming back to the former question, this is something I think soft power is about. We do all believe that an open world and collaborative world is a better place than where countries fighting each other. So we have a friendly competition, of course, but I think within the venue, I guess, from different perspective, this is, we have that common ground of believing that if you compare the world, how it could be and what it is, it might be better if we work together. So I think this is also and having that, if you know the other countries, chances to fight against them are lower.
Yeah.
That's also something that's, it's not a naive way of thinking things, but if you connect things, my wife has been studied in New Zealand for a while, my mother-in-law is coming from Denmark, and the chances I fight against these two countries are pretty low. But the fact knowledge, I mean, what we're talking here is knowledge, knowing the others, is a benefit for all.
Yes.
I mean, yes.
I'd quite like to finish on that, but we do have probably just enough, just a few minutes.
Have we got time?
For David to, I was going to ask all of you, but David already has a practical example of how to take the findings of the soft power index and translate it into something to do with talent.
Well, thank you, Claire. And the purpose for this was because I was thinking about if I was sitting in the audience now, what I would like to take away would be a practical kind of thought about how we could link some of these wonderful things together. So I thought I'd do it very quickly in a minute or two, talk about a little bit of mini case study. So New Zealand Story it works with brand finance. We really appreciate the data that they put out. And we were thinking about the work that comes out in the Soft Power report. How might we use it for talent attraction? In particular, in the technology sector, we've all talked about this kind of competition for high-value technical skills. And New Zealand, like any other country around the world, has a very fast-growing technology sector. It's our second largest industry now, which is quite remarkable. It's growing at double-digit growth every year. Gaming, clean tech, environmental technology, our space program, we're the fourth most prolific in the world at the moment at launching rockets. Now, all this doesn't happen without talented people. And the tech sector said, well, we need to find some more talented people. They came to us as part of the New Zealand government system. We went to brand finance and said, okay, what might we be able to do? So first of all, our approach was define the key markets where we think the talent might live, where we can approach people, things like where we know there are the right skills, where the visa requirements match, where they've got attraction to New Zealand, and that's a critical point. That comes from the brand finance report. We used that GSPI data to understand the audiences then in those markets, because if you ask the team from brand finance, they can drill in a lot more into some of this information. We can then use that also to create some messages that are tailored to those audiences, again, based on what we now know about them through the data. And then we can coordinate that and actually target our ad spend. So we're like everyone in our industries, very constrained on our budgets. We have to make sure that we spend them wisely. So for us, we look through the Global Soft Power Index. You can see things where we have perceived weaknesses and where we have perceived strengths. And our trick was then to say, well, how could we leverage one to help the other? For example, New Zealand is perceived very highly on things like having sustainability at our core, being a beautiful place to visit and live, but not so strongly on science and technology. And so then what we did is did some quantitative work on this data and then turned that into some focus groups and started to understand, well, how could we leverage one against the other? People were very interested in the idea that you could think about sustainability and technology in one hit. And so we were talking about tech that is good for the world. How could our technology sector present itself as not just creating short-term consumer apps, but things that are deep and meaningful. So that was really the value of the data and the insights, and then we can create these core messages you see along the bottom there. We can turn that into then targeted content. And we can turn the video down, if you don't mind, turn the audio off. Thank you. So then we can then create campaigns. This is just an example, targeted per market. So this is the one for the UK. And we know, for example, that the UK wanted to know that there were cities, that it wanted to know that there was diversity and opportunity, that they could access the same sort of healthcare that they access here in the UK, and we have the same sort of public health system. So these little campaigns, and we created them by market, as I say, there's sort of one for South Africa that's different than the one for Korea, that's different than the one from the Philippines, built on that data that we got from the GSPI and the messaging. So, practical tips, and we did all that, I think, on a budget of less than about $50,000 US. So, a pretty targeted campaign, and we actually got some incredible breakthroughs, lots of numbers up there. The most important one for me is the brand guy for New Zealand, 65 million impressions based on a very small ad spend because we were so targeted and we could really make the messaging hit home. And thousands of people applying for jobs, which is even better. Thank you.
Well done.
Well done.
And you managed to do that and leave us 15 seconds to say thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and thank you to the panel, Alexandre from Presence Switzerland, and Johanna from Business Finland, and David from New Zealand Story. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.